All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving deep today
Yeah.
into internal controls.
Ooh, internal control.
Yeah, the systems that businesses use
Yeah.
to make sure everything's running smoothly and honestly.
Right.
We've got our hands on some excerpts from what seems like a pretty important document, all about internal controls.
I like it.
And let me tell you, things are getting interesting. Regulators are really upping the ante
Uh-oh.
on what companies need to be doing to, fight fraud and scams
hmm
and protect people like us, consumers and investors.
Yeah, it's about time.
What's really fascinating here is that we're not just talking about basic controls anymore, like checking the boxes and hoping for the best.
Right.
This document really emphasizes a more proactive approach to risk management, almost like companies need to be able to predict where fraud might happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. The
Oh.
old ways just aren't cutting it anymore. Scammers are getting more sophisticated every day. Data breaches are becoming more common. Businesses need to step up their game.
Absolutely. And speaking of stepping up their game, I'm looking at this section here about reporting on different types of fraud.
Okay.
It seems like regulators want companies to track a much wider range of scams than before.
Yeah, they're trying to get a clearer picture of the whole fraud landscape,
Yeah.
by collecting data on everything. From those phishing attacks,
Right.
the ones where you get that email, it looks like it's from your bank, to identity theft.
Uh-huh.
And even those fake charity scams, the ones that always seem to pop up after a natural
Oh,
disaster.
yeah, those are the worst.
The worst. So by gathering all this data, regulators can start to spot trends and patterns and use that information to develop better prevention strategies.
So it's like they're building this massive database of fraud, almost like a fingerprint database, but for scams.
Exactly. And that data can be incredibly valuable, not just for businesses,
Hmm.
but for law enforcement too.
Makes you think, doesn't it? What if we had this kind of data during the Equifax breach a few years back?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of damage could have been prevented if regulators had access to more comprehensive data, data that could have flagged those warning signs earlier.
Absolutely. Okay, here's something I find really interesting. This document talks about clearly defining when customers get reimbursed if they fall victim to fraud.
Oh,
Is that a new focus?
it is, and it kind of suggests a shift in thinking. In the past, companies were mainly focused on avoiding liability.
Right.
But this seems to be more about making the process smoother for victims and helping them recover, which
Yeah.
is a good thing.
It is a good thing. So less finger pointing, more action like that.
I like that too.
Okay, let's talk about continuous monitoring,
Okay.
because this seems to be a pretty big deal in these documents.
It's crucial. It's like, think about your home alarm system.
Okay, yeah.
You wouldn't just set it once and never touch it again, right?
No.
You check the batteries, you update the codes, you might even install some new sensors
Wow.
as technology changes. Continuous monitoring is basically the same thing, but for a company's fraud prevention systems, they need to be constantly testing, tweaking, updating their defenses to stay ahead of the bad guys.
So they're always on high alert, but how do they actually keep track of all this information? I mean, we're talking mountains of data here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Mountains of data. And that's where data and reporting come in.
Okay.
It's not enough to just collect data. You need to be able to understand it. You need to be able to trace its origins. And you absolutely need to ensure its quality. Imagine a detective trying to solve a crime
Okay.
with a box of evidence that's completely disorganized, full of duplicates. That's what it's like trying to manage fraud risk with bad data.
Right. So data is the key to solving the puzzle, but only if it's the right data.
Exactly. Garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
If a company is relying on inaccurate or incomplete data, their entire fraud prevention program is compromised.
And then there's this term, data reconciliation,
Oh, yeah.
which sounds a bit technical. What
Eh.
does that actually mean in this context?
Think of it like balancing your checkbook.
Okay.
You're making sure that all the numbers match up, that there are no discrepancies, no missing pieces. In fraud prevention, data reconciliation is all about making sure that the data being used to make decisions is accurate and consistent across all systems.
So kind of like a financial audit,
Yeah,
but for your fraud prevention program.
exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
Talk about authorization. This seems to be all about keeping those bad actors out in the first place.
Absolutely. Strong authentication is key.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about moving beyond simple passwords to more robust methods like multi-factor authentication, where you need to provide multiple pieces of evidence to verify your identity. It's like having a lock on your door and a security guard checking IDs.
Makes sense. So not just one strong barrier,
Yeah.
but layers of protection. The document also mentions things like biometrics and tokens. Can you break
Yes.
those down a little bit?
Sure. Biometrics use unique biological traits, like your fingerprint or your facial features, to identify you. It's what you see on your phone when you use Face ID to unlock it. Tokens, on the other hand, are physical devices.
Right.
Think of those little keychains that generate a new code every minute. They provide an extra layer of security. Both of these are becoming more and more common as ways to prevent unauthorized access.
So we're talking about a digital fortress with multiple layers of security. But even with the best defenses, sometimes things slip through the cracks. And that's where resolution and remediation come in.
Right, and this is where we see a huge shift in expectations. Regulators aren't satisfied with companies simply reacting to fraud anymore.
Okay.
They want to see proactive measures in place to identify, address, even self-report potential issues.
Wow. So sweeping things under the rug is no longer an option.
Not at all. Transparency is key.
Transparency, okay.
And this goes beyond simply responding to actual fraud cases. Companies need to have systems in place to detect and investigate all kinds of red flags.
Like what kinds of red flags?
We're talking about unusual account activity, customer complaints, even whistleblower reports. They can't just wait for something to go wrong before taking action.
So they're not just reacting to fraud, they're actively looking for it. That's a big change.
Huge change. And it shows a growing understanding that companies have a responsibility to create safer systems from the ground up.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. It seems like the world of fraud prevention is changing fast,
Fast.
and businesses need to adapt. Proactive measures, data integrity, strong authentication, it's all on the table. But what does this mean for us as consumers?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, if companies are taking on more responsibility for preventing fraud, does that mean we can relax a little bit? Or should we be even more careful? Knowing how sophisticated these scams are becoming, it's a tough question, and I think it's one that we all need to think about carefully.
That is some serious food for thought. Always stay curious, my friends, and remember, knowledge is power, especially in this digital age. We'll see you next time.
So yeah.